Okay, today we are going to implement a cash register class. So basically, this is the something that we'd like to implement today using Python. So this is a cash register, right? And so we're gonna first create a class called cash register. And the behavior of the cash registers, behaviors, of the cash registers are, let's say, add item. So basically, whenever you add, basically, when you buy something, that item is going to be added to this cash register. Then the price, of course, goes up. So total amount of owed. And then this another method called get count means count basically number of items purchased, right? And then the clear the cash register for new sale. Basically, we'll implement a couple of method, right, in today's lecture. So, for example, this is the like actual Python implementation of the class called cash register. So always start with the class. This is keyword, the name of the class, cash register, and then you have, as you can see, a couple of method or the functions. So like add items and get total. As you can see, the add item and get total, right? And using the class, right? Using the class, you can create an object. So from the class, right? From the class, you can create an object of class cash register. And this is a typical way in Python. This is a typical way to create an object. So you starting with a reference variable. I mean, that's just variable. This reference variable is equal, meaning that this reference variable is referencing a object. So to create an object, you always use the class name, right? Cash register. As you can see, this is what? This is the name of the cash register, is the name of the class, right? So you create name of the class, and then you put the parenthesis. If there's any value that you need to input, then this is not, at this point, there's this implementation, basically, you don't really require put any arguments, right? So that's why there's nothing in this parenthesis. But there is a way. I mean, if you implement constructor in such a way that if the constructor gets the input from the main, then you need to write something here in this parenthesis. But anyway, at this point, register 1, as you can see, this is a reference variable, is pointing to the actual object of cash register, right? Class cash register. So actually, this is the object of type or the class cash register. This reference variable is pointing to this object. Using the method, once you create a method, for example, add item, right? Like add item, then you are able to invoke this method which belongs to this cash register object, right? Add item or the class. You can use that using the reference variable. So right now, as you can see, this reference variable is pointing to the object register 1, and then the dot. So this is the syntax. So register 1 dot add item, and 195 in this case means that the item, one item, the price of that item is $1.95. So the one item is added, right, to this cash register. So basically, in this lecture, we are going to implement a couple of the get method, and then we're going to implement a couple of set method. The get method we learned in the previous lecture. The get method is also called accessor method. And set method is also called mutator method. So the accessor method is get total, means try to get the total price, and the get count means get the number of items, right? And then the mutator method is add item, right? So by using the mutator method, the add item, basically one item is added, and then you put the price, right? And you know, self it's just a Python syntax. So whenever you implement a set method in the parameter or in the argument, in the parameter, you need to put a self, no matter what. I mean, this is must. So so this is just Python syntax, as we learned in our previous lecture. So that basically the price is the actual parameter, right? So when you invoke this add item, as you can see, you have to provide actual value. So in this case, $1.95. Since this method, this function requires to have a value for this particular parameter, parameter variable price. Okay, now, okay, so there are a couple of things that you must know. This is something that we already learned in the previous lecture, but let's just review one more time. Instance variables should be only be defined in the constructor. All the variables, including instance variables, are created at runtime. The constructor is invoked before any method can be called, so instance variables that were created in the constructor are sure to be available in all method. So our first step, right? So let's just, okay, so the always, that's why the first step, right? Always the first step is to create a constructor. Okay, so before we actually implement constructor, let's just briefly talk about this class cash register, right? Let me just end my lecture here. And in next lecture, I'm going to briefly talk about the structure of the class cash register. Then the third step is to show you how to implement the constructor. Okay.